It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
So this next story we have is that our good friends over at JetBlue. Now, if you go back a couple episodes, I think maybe 10 episodes, 5 episodes, something like that. We put out we talked about a story where Frontier was attempting to buy Spirit, and it was literally the two junkiest airlines on the face of the planet trying to buy, like, going to merge into one super conglomerate of terrible airline. It's literally like if Megabus and Greyhound were like, "Hey guys, we're going to combine into one company." So now only do you not have any choice at the bottom of the spectrum.
That's right.
The one choice you have is like, "Hey, do you guys want to sit in some pee or do you want to sit in some pee?" Now,
to me, it'd be a little bit like a Greyhound wants to buy school buses, or vice versa.
Whatever.
We're just gonna have one bus available for everybody.
Yeah. So
whether you're going to class, whether you're a senior in high school or you're going to Miami, you're riding on the same bus.
Correct. So what's interesting now is JetBlue has proposed that they will buy Spirit Airlines for $3.6 billion instead of I forget what the original.
Well, so let's make this a little simpler. The original bid for Frontier and Spirit was to give Spirit $23 a share.
Right.
I'm sorry. JetBlue, right, was $23 a share. JetBlue is now offering $33 per share, so $10 more per share.
I think you mean Frontier. Frontier was offering 23.
Yes, Frontier was offering 23. JetBlue was offering 33. I apologize. Okay. I get tongue-tied.
Yep. So why this is interesting is JetBlue kind of has a reputation of being, hey, this is like service as good as Southwest, but airplanes as good as Delta. And the biggest thing so I was in a business a long time ago when I was going up and down the East Coast, and I would hop on JetBlue flights, and this was great. But the problem is JetBlue, like, I could only go from New York to Boston. I couldn't go from, Boston back to the Midwest. I had to fly a different airline. So they had initially done a deal with American Airlines to help, fill out their routes. But by buying Spirit, they can fill out their routes. And what they're saying is, we're just going to take Spirit Airlines, we're going to buy up their planes and their routes and convert everything into the JetBlue Way, which I think says, what?
This doesn't make real sense to me.
Okay.
What this makes to me is
So they're going to go from making the dumbest, the megabus of the air, right? And they're going to turn this into Hyundai 2010. So 2010 is when Hyundai went from being a joke to like, hey, this is you can actually drive this car and enjoy it, right? Or it's a good car. And so I think that's what's kind of happening, right? Is like, oh, hey, like, we're going to be making $60,000 Hyundais now, right?
This feels like, to me, like the old mobster way of, I've only got one buyer, so I'm going to convince this other guy to come in and give me another bid just to drive up the other buyer. Because look, this is an unsolicited offer. Right? This is literally JetBlue coming out and going, Danny, I'm going to write you a $3.6 billion check. Well, can you send that over in writing? No, why don't you talk to your wife about it first and get back to me? Like, so there's nothing real about this yet, right? It's an unsolicited offer that they can now put out into the world that you and I talk about. It goes back to, and then puts,
Frontier
pressure on Frontier, because here's what I don't understand. JetBlue and Spirit both are East Coast airlines. You just said it. You would get on a JetBlue flight, but they're very limited on where you could go, especially heading west, because they're both East Side airlines.
You can go, I think you can go JetBlue East to West, but it's limited. I think you're just going New York to Los Angeles.
That's what I'm saying. There's not a lot of options when you start traveling, right? They're East Coast based. They've got a lot more flights going up and down the East Coast.
So Frontier makes sense together. Because Frontier's more West Coast.
Frontier's West Coast. So if Frontier and Spirit combine, you've now linked all of your, makes sense, country. Right? You've got the whole country together. If you're one is to compete with the big four, right? Your Delta, your
Right.
Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, right? So if
You
your
think
goal
Southwest is a
is,
big four?
it's 100% a big four. It's
Well,
considered,
all right.
yeah. I mean, those are Delta, United, American, and
Talk, talk,
Southwest are
talk
your
about
big four airlines.
yeah. Talk about a guy trying to pump up a stock, right?
Hey,
Because he
I
owns
love
it.
Southwest Airlines, and you
So do
can't say
I.
anything about it. Hey, go
No,
ahead and hit me with
so
those SEC violations. I'm doing less than Elon Musk. All right, but so if your goal is to at one day, right, on some
yeah.
level compete with the big four, it's not combining two East Coast based companies.
Airlines, yeah.
Okay, but if you've got you said this when we talked about this originally was you were like, well, what other mergers out there might happen, right? JetBlue buy this other company or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think this is a good old fashioned let's pump up the stock price right out there merger so that our investors can get more money. And oh, by the way, none of this has been approved by the SEC, right, for
Right.
antitrust
Yeah.
because your left leaning politicians big against any of these mergers
Yeah.
because
Scum.
these
Yeah.
well, stop it. These
That's my
mergers
opinion.
these mergers in their opinion
Right.
hurt the monopoly thing,
Consumers.
the option,
Yeah.
consumer
So
options.
right. So here's my thing. Getting rid of Spirit Airlines, however you do it, right? Whether it's, taking all their planes and remotely flying them into the ocean, whatever it is you do to hurt, you're not hurting the consumer. The consumer that is hurt by Spirit Airlines is the consumer that flies Spirit Airlines. That's just my opinion. That is not the official opinion of this podcast or its
Right.
holdings company. That is simply my opinion, and it's considered puffery when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to free speech in the context of these kinds of things. So if any attorney is out there trying to think I'm allowed to say this because it's satire, it's a joke.
Could you say it on Twitter? I don't know. Is that the line now? I don't know. Could you say it on Twitter?
Well,
I don't know.
I'm using the Fox News defense. This is entertainment. This isn't news. So
Not no single reasonable person would believe the words that are coming out of his mouth. There, got it.
correct. So except for me, but so I just think that
I believe they call that the Tucker Carlson defense. Go ahead.
that's correct. Yes, that's what I'm using, and big fan. Call me Tucker. So listen, I think that this merger makes so much more sense because it would. So what would happen is I think they would take a lot of that bandwidth and start to blanket the West Coast. Don't you? They would take some of those. Like they would open up new airports and that kind of thing. That's what I think.
That takes
Not
a lot
open
of
up new airports.
logistics.
I think they're landing at new airports is what I
Yeah,
mean by that.
pushing planes to different places and you know what I mean,
Right.
opening up routes and as they say and stuff like that. There's a lot that goes into that, right? From a planning
Right.
standpoint, and
Which
there are
is
already flights and
right, which is why a company like Frontier buying a company like Spirit actually made a lot of sense.
yeah,
It's
West Coast, East Coast, the routes are already there. You're just buying
right.
routes.
So like Southwest had bought a different competitor, I forget which one, AirTran maybe, some
Yeah, but
time ago.
Southwest, the two I think two major mergers that Southwest did, Southwest retired all of the planes.
So they
Like so
bought the
that
routes.
they bought the routes. They could say they're very consistent using their planes. Southwest is they use a very specific plane. It keeps cost of you know what I mean, work down and parts down,
They
and that's
only
their
have one
model.
kind of plane.
One kind of plane.
So I have adopted this model in socks. I only own one kind of sock, and so when more than 50% of those socks have holes or they're unusable, I throw all of them out, and I go buy a whole new set of the exact same sock,
There
so
you
I
go.
never have to pair my socks anymore. So there is but you got to love a company with that kind of perspective, which is we just do one thing. They're the Chick-fil-A of airlines.
Well, it keeps
Um,
costs down, right?
and
It
we
keeps
don't do
mechanics down, parts down, all of this
right,
kind of stuff. But anyway, so I obviously these companies aren't going to do that, right?
right,
But they're going to look. There's going to be, if the SEC allows it, there's going to be a merger in the near future of
of
whether it's
one of these
JetBlue and
airlines.
Frontier, or I'm sorry, JetBlue and Spirit, or
Right.
Frontier and Spirit. It doesn't matter. What I am curious to see on the other side of this is whichever company is left out.
Right.
How do they catch up? Because whoever's
Yeah.
left out of this merger, now they can at least on some footing compete with the big four, right?
Yeah, it's going to be rough
But
now.
but how does JetBlue survive if Frontier and Spirit merge? I mean, seriously.
Right,
I mean, they can always be a niche and have a certain amount of routes, right? And be
right,
very niche, inexpensive, but they're going to continually have to cancel flights because they're just not selling enough tickets to
right,
pay the pilot, to pay the crew, right? Whatever.
right.
Or the fuel cost or whatever it may be. That's the other one people don't realize, and I'm not going to get onto the fuel costs right now, but most airlines use gas futures. They
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
gas.
In the future.
Southwest is notorious for negotiating like 5-year contracts of constantly gas
Right.
pricing, right? So they negotiate these gas prices, and guess what? They go up sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And when they go up, a company like Spirit, JetBlue, Frontier, right? They can't
mhm,
negotiate these ultra long contracts like a
right,
Southwest or American. They get stuck with these higher costs of fuel, and
correct.
they can't go up on their prices. And that's when they know now. I would argue that JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, these companies know they can't take that next bump. They can't
Right,
survive that next bump. Their
right,
only choice is to merge and try to become stronger companies.
right.
Otherwise, they don't survive that next wave.
So, like, what JetBlue was trying to do with American Airlines was have an arrangement where, hey, if you book a flight that's on JetBlue, right,
Mm-hmm.
and to a city we don't fly to, we're going to book you from the parts we do fly, and then the rest goes on American Airlines, and vice versa,
Sure.
right? And the current administration has antitrust issues with that because it's not really a full merger. But and listen, I don't get why it's a problem, right? Because you're giving people more options. And but what I do think here is what if, and here's what I think will happen is I think all three of these companies become one company at some point because that's the only way they're all going to compete. And it sounds wacky, but if you think about it, in the rental car business, one company merged and then it set up a chain of events where all of the companies end up becoming. So you went from having five or six huge, I think it was five or six big rental car companies to having three. So the
Yeah, I was
three
going to
rental
say, don't
car
we have three? Because Enterprise
Enterprise
owns Alamo
and National,
and National. Yeah,
and then Avis and Budget became one company.
right.
So that's five. But they became so that's five companies
Two.
that became two companies, and then there's Hertz, and
Right.
Hertz is a wild. So what I'm saying is though is this merger will set off a chain of events where Frontier either dies and goes bankrupt, and then JetBlue, the new JetBlue with Spirit Airlines, buys up their routes or something along those lines. But here's the thing: I'm so old. I remember flying on TWA.
Yeah,
Does
I do.
anybody remember TWA? Like, does anybody remember Continental? So
Well,
the
because
the idea
this
is
has already happened once, actually twice in the airline industry, where small companies could not survive whatever the issue was, and usually
right.
it's surrounding gas prices. By the way, the
Yeah.
price of their gas goes up so extraordinarily, you
Right.
cannot compensate with prices, right?
Because
Uh,
if cause the reason you can't compensate by raising your prices is simple. Delta, American, uh, not Continental. What's the other one? Whoever bought US Air or whatever, whoever bought Continental, um, it
American,
doesn't matter.
Delta, United, and Southwest.
United. Yeah, so
United.
United, and there used to be a company called US Air.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, my parents immigrated to this country, and right now in their cutlery drawer, there is cutlery from Republic Airlines. What is Republic Airlines? Died before I was born, but
Right.
apparently they had metal cutlery, and my father bought them at an auction, and 40 years later refuses to put them in the garbage like a normal person would.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, what I'm driving at here is this antitrust game that is played by the regulators, which is like, we're going to regulate the economy to make it free. That's a misnomer. You can't, but two of those things don't add up properly. But besides that, these companies go out of business, they merge, new ones come on the market to compete. Gas prices, the fluctuations go up, it causes more mergers. It's all a crapshoot at the end, is what I'm getting at, right?
Well,
So
I mean, you obviously you know you make it very clear, and I agree with you. I believe in a free market with restrictions. You just believe in a free market,
yeah,
but the yes, I get where you're coming from, but I don't know that these kind of companies. I don't know how much money JetBlue makes. I mean, for all I know, it could literally be subsidized by the government because there's a bunch of those kind of things out there that
it's true
okay,
too.
no, we just have to have at least 7 airlines to at least
Right.
appear like we don't have a monopoly, right? To
Yeah.
keep Southwest and Delta from merging into South Delta and owning everything, right? Like in the rental
Yeah.
car business, right? The rental car business, somehow those got through all the things by just saying, all right, well, we'll keep the titles Alamo and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
National, right?
Right.
We'll keep green on the red on that. Ours will be,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Blue. Yeah.
And then we're all separate companies in the eyes of the people that rent from us because they all have separate pricing and everything, right, or whatever. My
Which
point
is,
though is maybe
yeah.
this is just fugazi as an
Yeah.
entirety, right?
Right.
But so I don't know that any of these companies are actual profitable companies. What I do know is that you, as an investor, if you bought stock in Frontier or Spirit at $5 a share, you're
Right.
likely to be making some money, right? When they sell it, however that happens.
Right. So I think it's what's the American rail company? What's the major American rail company? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Rail
Amtrak.
company, Amtrak. Okay.
Yeah. Amtrak is subsidized by the taxpayer to the tune of billions of dollars every year. No one is on the dang thing. And I can tell you because I know I have family in Minneapolis and Chicago that have used Amtrak and will tell you that if you book the Amtrak, it's longer than driving. It costs almost as much as driving. And if you book the ticket for a 3 o'clock train ride, you may leave at 3 tomorrow. Like we don't know
Right.
when this thing is
The
actually going to
train's
leave.
coming when the train gets coming. Yeah.
Right. And so I remember I dropped my folks off the train because my sister was having a surgery in Chicago, so they went to go take care of her. And I dropped them off. They were very concerned that they were going to be late. They said they texted me 8 hours later and said train just left. 8 hours. So you could have hopped on a Southwest flight for $80, but you
Right.
took the train for $60, and then it screwed up your whole schedule. So that and listen, I think JetBlue is publicly traded, so we can probably figure out if they're profitable or not. None of that's the point. The point is,
They're not
this
making tons of money. I could tell you that. Otherwise, they'd be growing
no
in a more
airlines.
traditional way, right?
No.
So, all of
Let
this
me ask you
also
this
has to be
question.
voted on by Spirit, right? Because
Yeah,
Spirit is a publicly traded company, so they have to
yeah.
vote on any kind of merger.
So let me ask you this question. Why isn't it that more airlines haven't adopted Southwest's extremely effective model when I can go on YouTube right now and I can watch 4 or 5 documentaries on how Southwest has become so successful? One airline, one class of seating, their baggage transfer system is really, really effective. They make a lot of stops. So listen, if I'm trying to go from Chicago to Austin, I'm going to end up stopping in Dallas. But let me tell you something. If I'm going from Chicago to Austin and I got to hop on a Delta flight, it's going to cost more money. I can't check my bags. And guess what? The Delta seats are designed for human beings that simply don't exist on this planet. Okay. Or at least in this country. Right.
Right. At least it's
So,
Americans in this country. Yes.
yeah.
The reason is as simple as why isn't every entrepreneur as enlightened as another entrepreneur, right? Why is Elon Musk different than you and I or anybody else on this planet? It's because they have different people telling them different things. Southwest
Yeah.
believes currently in its methodology, and
But it's worked for like
someday
40 years or something.
but someday there might be a CEO or president of Southwest that comes along and decides that they want to change it, even though it's worked for so long.
Right.
Delta and other American United, maybe they have. Look, we all have people that tell us what they think is the right thing. Those are all
Right.
different kinds of people. Some of them are
Right.
smart, some of them are dumb. I have
Right.
literally, in my lifetime, over the last 5 or 6 years, I have seen millionaires. I'm talking about millionaires upon millionaires upon millionaires. People that have more money than you understand what to do with in your lifetime. Now, they're not multi-billionaires like Jeff Bezos or
Of
Elon
course not.
Musk, but these are people that their grandkids don't ever have to work.
Right.
And just because they have that, we think that these are quote unquote more intelligent people, that they
Right.
are better at making decisions than most people, and a lot of people around them will listen to them. Now, me, I'm of a particular personality type that I don't care if you're a billionaire or if walk ducks for a living. I don't care. I take what you say, I
At face
analyze
value.
it,
Right.
and then it's true or not true based on the information that I'm getting. I'm not going to take just what you say, not for face value, because you're
Right.
a
Right.
millionaire. Because what I've seen is people that are these kinds of people, for whatever reason, in my experience, not the experience of Market Explainer or Danny, have a
Right.
tendency to surround themselves with complete idiots
Well,
in a
they have a
lot of
tendency to
cases.
they have a tendency to surround themselves with people who boost their ego and make themselves feel good.
And maybe that's it, but even sometimes where I know a couple of again millionaires that are very humble. They're not the egotistical kind of
Right. Right. Right.
crazy people, but they still have a tendency. I would never rely on their ability to
People.
gauge whether a person should be kept around or not, and they show
Right.
it over and over because they get their buddies, or quote unquote buddies, their
Right.
new buddy, their
Yeah.
old buddy, their old classmate they went to college with, or whatever. They continually hire these people for very well paid jobs in different companies, and I've
Right.
seen it almost completely demolish a company from the inside out. Because if
Yeah.
you hire Jackwagon to be made up management title here, and
Right.
he or she doesn't even know anything about that particular department that they're heading, that
Right.
entire department's morale goes off of a cliff in a hurry, right?
Fair enough.
And it can literally demolish a company from the inside out. So that's exactly why, taking it back to your question, was why is Southwest, why is nobody else copied? Because they're being told by people that say it's not worth it to change,
Right.
that
So
we're
what?
catering to the person that wants first class or
Right.
whatever.
And hey, and the first time I flew Southwest, I asked, "Oh, where's the first class?" Because I didn't have a first class ticket; I just had a regular ticket. They go, "Honey, everything on Southwest is first class."
That's right.
They
Every
got me.
seat on Southwest is first class.
So here's what just in conclusion, based on what you said, which is that is why this process of companies growing, failing, merging, that's why that process is kind of important, if you want to say important,
It's
is
really important.
because, yeah, it's because you need fresh blood. And what happens is sometimes the middle management of companies that watch, they serve under somebody's idiot friend who demoralizes their department. They go, listen, we're going to take three guys from here, whoever, three guys, three gals, and we're going to go start our own JetBlue because American Airlines or United or US Air or Republic or whoever, they suck at something. So we're going to go fix it with our own airline. And then they come up, they have a thesis. They go put that thesis to work in the marketplace. And the market says yay or nay. And then they go, oh crap, we got 50 planes and nobody likes our thesis. And so like, people say, all right, what if we treat people like chattel cattle and we start an airline for the subterranean subhuman class and we call it Spirit. And
Yeah, you're right in that. To me, that's what I love about capitalism. That's why I'm a capitalist.
yes,
Is because the market does dictate whether you succeed or fail,
correct.
right?
Yeah,
And depending on who your quote unquote market is,
right,
multiple people can in this case airlines, multiple companies can succeed doing different things because
right,
the market is big enough. But
right.
it doesn't always work that way. But yeah, that's what I am. If JetBlue and these other companies can't survive, then again, my initial reaction is, let them die. But then you get into that whole
Yeah,
no options, right? And without
right.
without any options, without any
But
competition,
is Spirit really competition for any airline? Right? Spirit, here's Spirit's competition. Beats walking. Okay. You got to go Boston, New York, and you got to walk. Beats
well,
walking.
in the way that is Walmart really competition to Louis Vuitton, right?
No.
Is Southwest Airlines has to take into account Spirit Airlines fees for a ticket
Yes.
if they're
Right.
flying out of the same airport to a very
Yeah.
similar place. Because if Southwest doesn't, Southwest just can't charge 3 times as much what Spirit does
Right.
and expect to be competitive. So it does in that particular market, and then they all drive each other, right? But if you take
Right.
that out and there's only two, it
Right.
gets crazy. We all know it does because that's just human nature.
So again, I'll just say this in closing. I happen to know that I think it was Spirit fought and won a lawsuit that that certain taxes cannot be charged if you buy the ticket at the counter. And I know somebody who lived in Dallas and would fly up north to see his kids. And what he would do was he would just roll up to the counter at DFW and buy the ticket. And so instead of it being $160 or whatever for a Spirit ticket
Yeah.
going back to the Midwest or going back to Minneapolis, it was $38. And this is the average size normal guy, and he would just buy two seats because
So it'd
it's
be
less.
$120 in fees
That's it. No, no,
in
yeah. So
taxes.
whatever. There was a bunch of taxes and fees that are assessed by the county, and so like in every
Wow.
situation where it's like, oh, this airport serves three cities,
Yeah.
serves four cities or whatever, each city gets to apply a tax. So when you go rent a car at a rental car company at the airport, it costs astronomically more than if you just get in an Uber for $20 and go to the suburban one and say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to rent it here, but drop it off at the airport. All of a sudden, the price gets really cheap. So this guy
Right.
would do that all the time, and he would just go, "So yeah, Spirits like the seats are like an inch and a half smaller than Delta or something like that." So what he would do is he would just buy two seats right next to each other, and it's
Mm-hmm.
$110. And he's like, plane's still landing in the place I needed to land. So.
Wow.
But we're going to move on to our next story. But before we get into the next story, I want to tell you the Market Explainer is brought to you by Big Man Gear. Big Man Gear is this guy's idea of a merchandise brand. And I want you to go check it out. It is printed and delivered by Amazon Prime. Thank you, Jeff. You can go to bigmangear.com and
Mm-hmm.
check it out.